I know the weather the past couple of days has been pretty insane. We hope you guys are all staying safe and warm. We have a really great speaker today, presentation, so thank you guys so much for spending your evening with us. We just have a few brief announcements and updates before we turn things over to our speaker today. First things first, our second semester dues are due today to Aiden, our treasurer. The amount for spring is $11. We have a QR code with Aiden's Venmo over in the bottom right, but his username is also here on the slide. Please make sure if you are sending dues that you include your name, number, and phone number. This is so we can make sure you are added to our email list and GroupMe. If you want to pay cash, please make sure you set up a time to meet with Aiden at some point today as well. Just a friendly reminder that paying dues is a requirement to be considered an active member and run for e-board this semester. So if you are interested in running for an executive board position, please make sure you pay dues on time. I'll leave that up for a couple more seconds if any of you guys need to scan it. All right. If you want to stay updated with PVMA events, please make sure to scan this QR code. We've had a couple of issues with this QR code, so if it isn't working for you, please just either email or group me message Emily Bunka, our president, so we can get you added to our email list. We send emails every Monday. If you did not get an email this Monday, also feel free to message Emily, but I'll leave that up for a few seconds as well. All right. Our next upcoming event is our SAVMA meeting on February 2nd, which is next Monday at 5:30 p.m. We will be sending additional details about joining the meeting. It's typically via Zoom during in Monday's email. This is a really easy way to get an additional point as well as stay up to date with what's going on at the Ohio State College of Veterinary Medicine. So highly, highly recommend going if you haven't attended a SAVMA meeting yet. And very exciting last update, but if you have attended an e-board meeting recently, you know that we've been trying to find ways to spotlight some of our more active and engaged GB members. So we're very excited to announce that, let's see if this works. Amani Thomas is our GB member of the month. We'll have a little certificate printed out for you. So big congratulations to Amani for being a very active, engaged member. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and talking and to turn things over to Dr. Advent.
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? I guess I don't know how you're going to tell me that you can hear me okay, but tell me if you can't hear me okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you guys for being flexible about doing this via Zoom. I really appreciate your guys' flexibility. So let me see if I can share. What does it want me to do here? Let me see. Then hopefully, why won't it let me? Here we go. Okay, well, thank you guys. You let me talk about one of the things I am extremely passionate about, which is shelter medicine. I could talk for hours on this, but you know, hopefully you guys will get the gist in an hour. And sorry, that's my dog barking, but I promise that will stop in a second. So I'm going to go over kind of a little bit about how I got into shelter medicine, what my career path looked like a little bit, because I think as you guys are kind of considering different career paths and whether you're going to stay in veterinary medicine or not, or whatever that looks like. This was not really something anybody ever talked to me about. I didn't really know existed. And yet it was the perfect career for me. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got here and then a little bit about what shelter medicine looks like, at least for me in my role, and how you guys can get involved. So I'm pretty boring. I'm born and raised in Columbus. I've lived here my whole life. As you can see, I did pretty much all of my education here at Ohio State. So I did my bachelor's. I went on to get my master's of public health. I really thought that my dream job was going to be that I was going to go work for the CDC and I was going to be an epidemiologist. And that's what I wanted to do. And kind of near the end of my master's, I was like, you know what? I think I want to go to vet school. I think that's going to make me a better epidemiologist, I really wanted to focus on zoonotic disease. And so that is actually why I went into vet school. Maybe like my third year into the process, I was like, you know what? I think I maybe just want to be a more traditional veterinarian. I want to try it and make sure that, you know, that's it, it was intriguing enough to me that I was like, I should try that first before I kind of go through the whole moving to another country and that whole thing, you know? Um, because I was like, I really like connecting with people. And unfortunately, you don't hear that a lot in veterinary medicine. Most people are very animal focused, but I realized how much I really needed that connection with other people and how much I really liked that part of veterinary medicine. And I wanted to make sure I explored that a little bit. And so right out of school, I actually joined a general practice. For those of you who are familiar with Ohio, I joined down in Circleville, so kind of in a rural part, not too far out of Columbus, but in a more rural part. And it was hard. It was really hard. It was not at all what I thought it was going to be. I was really overwhelmed, and I was really struggling with all of these people who love their pets dearly, but they didn't have access to veterinary care. We were like one of the only clinics down there. They had no emergency center. Most of these people did not have very good education around their pet and, what that meant for them and the finances around that. And so it was a struggle. I just saw all these pet parents struggling to have their pets in their home the way that they wanted to. And it was really hard. It was working really long hours, and I got really burnt out. And I started to question whether or not I actually wanted this at all. And did I want to kind of go back to that other route? Did I want to kind of go back to the epidemiology and there's a different part of veterinary medicine I liked. And so I kind of just picked up shifts all over the place in lots of different areas. And as if you guys go to vet school at Ohio State, you will learn that in your fourth year, you do a 2-week rotation at Columbus Humane. And we teach you spay, neuter, and just kind of shelter medicine basics and all that good stuff. And I remember that rotation from when I was a student, and when I was doing relief work, they were looking for somebody. And I remember just having such a like positive experience there and feeling very warm and welcome. And I was like, huh, I wonder what that would be like to have to work there for a little bit. I fell in love. I knew right away that was where I wanted to be. So I ended up getting in there, and then they hired me as their shelter veterinarian. And this was about, oh gosh, 8 years ago. And I was it. I was the only veterinarian for the shelter. It was just me by myself. um, and very quickly we expanded and we grew. And then all of a sudden there were 2 veterinarians, then 3 of us. And then I kind of stepped into a new role as a medical director of the shelter, kind of overseeing a team of 4. And then probably in the past, let's see, it's been about 3 years now, we opened up our second facility, really primarily aimed at addressing access to veterinary care issues with a pet food pantry and a low-cost vet clinic. And as I oversaw both of those departments, both of those buildings, that is when I've stepped into my new role as a chief medical officer. And then in the past year, expanded that a little bit, and I'm now also our chief operating officer for Columbus Humane. So to say I'm in it, and I am in it for a long time, I really am. So a little bit about Columbus Humane, if you guys don't know what that is, and I think it's important because something about shelter medicine that is a blessing and a curse is that not all shelters are the same. They don't get their funding in the same way. They don't operate in the same way. They don't necessarily handle the same species. So Columbus Humane has been around for a very long time. We came to be in about 1883. We are a nonprofit, so we are not a government agency, and almost all of our funding comes through private donation. That is significantly different than if you guys are familiar with Franklin County Dog Shelter, which is also in Columbus. They are a government funded agency. And so very little of their funding actually comes from private donation. Almost all of that comes through government funding or your tax dollars here in Franklin County. Who do we serve? Primarily the homeless and unwanted pet population, right? So stray cats, you have a dog and you're moving, you don't want them anymore. That's primarily what we're here for. We have around 250 animals in our care each day. Obviously, that fluctuates from day to day. And the thing that makes us really unique when you look at other shelters, in particular in the Columbus area, is that we do all species. So while there are a lot of shelters who just do dogs, we're very cat heavy. We do dogs and we also do exotics. If it can be considered a pet and you have it in your home, we care for it. So you name it, pot-bellied pigs, bearded dragons, tortoises, ferrets, all that kind of good stuff. Rabbits is the number 3 species we adopt out, so we do a ton of rabbits as well. You also may have heard of us because we have the largest cruelty investigation department in the state. We operate 365 days a year. We currently have 7 humane agents on staff, so it's a big piece of what we do. And then really we're community support. We're a resource for the community, right? So we do a lot of trap, neuter release for community and feral cats. We do crisis boarding. So if you're in a domestic violence situation, your house burned down, you're immediately unhoused unexpectedly, and you have nowhere to go with your pet, we will take your pet in while you get back on your feet. And like I said, we opened up our second facility, the Essential Care Center, which is really focused on a different population, owned animals, where the shelter is to help unowned animals. The Essential Care Center is to help owned animals. And as I'll talk about later, shelter medicine is really moving into surrender prevention and how to keep pet families together. And the Essential Care Center is really there to help do that. I don't want you to surrender the pet that you love all because you can't afford dog food. I gotcha. I'll get you the dog food. Keep your animal that you love and that pet that loves you. Let's keep your family unit together, right? Or maybe it's just that you're on Social Security. We get this a lot. You're on Social Security and you just can't afford to do the $3,000 dental on your dog. You know what I mean? You take great care of it, but you just can't afford that extra expense because you're on a fixed income or you're on government assistance. We're here to do that for you for really cheap. So that's kind of our newest, biggest venture and likely where our organization is kind of going in the future. So I talk about shelter medicine. Like I kind of said, this was something that nobody really talked to me about as I was kind of going through that career searching phase. Even when I started vet school, nobody really talks about it. And when people do talk about it, they don't talk about it as like a really cool evolving specialty in vet med, and it is. So you can actually get board certified in shelter medicine. It is now a recognized specialty within the field, and it's growing rapidly. One of the biggest reasons it is growing so rapidly is because of that access to veterinary care space. I'll talk a little bit about this later, but as you see more and more socioeconomic challenges for the population as a whole, you see more and more people struggling to access veterinary care, and a lot of that leads to surrender of your pet to an animal shelter. And so humane societies are really the ones who are trying to solve the access to veterinary care problem. We're the ones trying to open up low-cost clinics, trying to figure out how to do high-volume spay neuter, help the community as much as possible. And the coolest part about shelter medicine that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough is it's everything. I do all aspects of veterinary medicine. I work on all species. I do it all. I do, regular medicine. I do surgery. I do all kinds of surgery. I get to do, public speaking. I testified in Congress for the telemedicine bill. I'm a public health advocate because we care about animals being safe in our communities. You get to do so many things. Shelter medicine is really community medicine. It's all the ways in which you can have impact with veterinary medicine locally and nationally too. And so I think that's really cool. Not something that I think gets talked about enough is it's such a good variety of what you get to do. It's almost the opposite of trying to specialize in something. It's the ability to basically do all aspects of veterinary medicine because we don't have the resources to go out and get different specialties. So I'm it. When an animal comes to me and they have a health problem, I have to fix it. So what is shelter medicine? A lot of people really kind of think about this distinction between managing a population or herd health and managing an individual animal. And this is something we consider quite a bit, right? My population changes every day. So the animals that I left today, a lot of them probably are getting adopted while I sit here, and new ones are coming in. So by the time I get in tomorrow, I will have a completely different population or a pretty good turnover, right? Most of my animals have no vaccine history, or they have been living outside or things like that. And so they're coming in with diseases, unknown vaccine history, and you're putting them all together. And the population's changing and moving. And sometimes that's a recipe for disaster. And so when you're making decisions or you're acting as a shelter doctor, you have to take that into account, right? And so when you may have an individual animal in front of you who has, maybe it's a puppy and it broke with parvovirus, as that individual animal and the veterinarian for that one puppy, you're like, okay, can I get it supportive care? I'm going to do the IVs. I'm going to do all the things for it. I'm going to give it the antibody. We're going to keep going, right? But I have to understand that if I put that puppy back in the shelter with 200 other animals with all with unknown vaccine histories, I risk all 200 of those dogs breaking with parvo, and how detrimental that would be for all those other animals. So every time we make decisions, I have to think not only about the individual animal, but the impact on the larger population as a whole, so that we don't shut down, so that lives aren't unnecessarily lost, right? And like I said, infectious disease, this is a big one. Like when you're talking shelters, we have animals who are sick, we have animals who are stressed, and so their immune systems are lower. They're underweight because they've been, stray outside for months. Most of them don't have vaccines on board. And so we see a ton of this. And it's almost this like perfect recipe where you take all these unknown animals who are unvaccinated and you put them in a really close space, right? And you have lots of people and hands touching all of them all the time. So we do a lot of outbreak management, a lot of infectious disease control. Decision making, this can be a blessing and a curse as a shelter doctor. You have this really unique situation where, as the veterinarian, you are now the owner of that animal and its treating veterinarian. And so you have full autonomy to be able to make decisions for every animal that comes in front of you, which is amazing, right? You're not trying to haggle with somebody and get them to understand that their dog has fleas. Please just buy the flea medication, you see the problem, you diagnose it, you treat it, right? Sometimes that can be really hard though, and the decisions are not so easy. And so every animal that is coming in front of you, you have to decide, how does that animal move through best? What is the best pathway for that animal, right? Does it need to go to foster? Does it need to go to rescue? Can it just go straight to the adoption floor? Is it suffering? Is this inhumane to house this animal? Do we need to consider euthanasia? So sometimes that can be really hard to be kind of that owner and also that veterinarian at the same time. I think when a lot of people think about shelter medicine, they think about this piece, and kind of how sometimes that can feel heavy. And it can. It is also incredibly freeing to have that autonomy as a doctor to practice the way that you want and the way that you see fit. Limited resources is the other thing people think of when they think of shelter medicine, is a lack of funds. And there's a lack of funds, right? That's kind of the nature of all nonprofits. And especially in today's day and age, they're not super well funded. And so that can make things really hard. I do have to consider that, right? So, I can't take $10,000 and invest it into one dog and get him a bilateral hip replacement, because that $10,000 in reality could probably help me get about 200 cats adoption ready and into homes, right? And so where you put your money and how you invest is something that we have to consider all the time, because you're always trying to figure out how to have maximum impact using the least amount of resources, because the more resources you save, the more animals you can help. And so you're kind of in this never-ending game. Some people that really stresses them out. Me, I love that piece because to me it's like a big puzzle. And so I'm always like, oh, I can do this and I can do this, and oh, I can save money here and help more animals this way. So it is something that we think about. I will say we are very lucky at Columbus Humane, and we have a pretty decent set of resources. And so I get to do a little bit more than some other shelters. There are a lot of shelters who can't even afford to have a veterinarian on staff full time, and we're lucky we have 8. So we're very blessed in that capacity. And so while this is a factor that I consider, it's not nearly like it is for some of these smaller, more rural shelters. public health, to make sure that the animals we put back out into the community are safe and free of any of the scary diseases, right? What a nightmare if I were to adopt out a dog that had rabies and then bit a human, right? Oh my gosh, I can't actually think of a worse nightmare to happen than that. So, public health is a big part of what we do. I am putting animals back out in the community. I have to, with the best of my ability, say that they are disease free and safe for the public. It's a really big one. Forensics. Not every shelter does animal cruelty investigations, and so not every shelter doctor is going to have this. I do a lot of this because, like I said, we're the largest investigative body in Ohio. And then education and advocacy. People are calling all day, and we are really a resource for the community. We get a lot of, hey, I found kittens in my backyard. What do I do? And we educate them. Do you see mom around? What's going on here? What's your environment look like? How long have they been there for? Or, oh, I found a stray dog on the side of the road. What do I do? Walking them through the process. We are a huge education resource for the community and helping them understand animals in their community, what to do next, what we're here for, how we can help them. One of the biggest things we say is that we are a say yes organization. If you come to me, I'm here to help you. If I can't solve your problem, I will put you in touch with somebody who can. We are a resource and we are here to help people and educate and get them an answer or to get them help. Okay, so what are some of the biggest health things we do? By far, the biggest thing we do is preventative care. Like I said, I get animals in, most of them have never seen a veterinarian before in their life, right? And I know that if I want these things to be adopted and I want this to be the most successful for that pet and for that adopter, I got to get them all the basics, right? And so every animal, when they come in, immediately on intake gets vaccinated. So they come in the door, they go right into medical and they get vaccinated right away. They're going to get dewormed. They're going to get flea tick medication. We're going to scan them for a microchip. We're going to, if they're a dog, they'll get a heartworm test. If they're a cat, they'll get a retroviral test. And we kind of just assess their overall health and then get them nice and protected because they're going into a big building with what, like I said, a lot of other animals that might have disease. And so we want those vaccines on board right away. And then before they leave our care, they have to be spayed and neutered. We are big on the preventing the overpopulation. That is still a thing, despite what some people may say. So every animal then, if they don't have a microchip, they'll get microchipped at surgery and then they'll get spay neuter before they get adopted. So prevention is really the backbone of shelter medicine. We do this on dozens of animals every day. And then, like I said, we're in a high risk environment. We see infectious disease on a level that most other veterinarians do not encounter because we are inviting a whole bunch of unvaccinated, never seen a veterinarian before in their life, stray animals into a building all at one time. And so you're going to see it. We see a ton of upper respiratory infection, in particular in cats and in dogs. I see a lot of ringworm. We also see the big scaries, I call them. So the parvo, the panleukopenias, and distemper, we do see them. Thankfully, we do not see them as often as sometimes I'm seeing like the upper respiratory stuff, but we do see them, and in particular quite a lot in the winter. So we've had a little bit of an uptick in these things. Parasites, like I said, none of these animals are likely on prevention, and oftentimes they've been out in the streets roaming for a minute, and so they've collected any type of bug they can find. We see a ton of fleas, a lot of ticks in the summer months, and then most of these guys have some kind of worm burden when they come into us. So this is also a really big thing that we do, and that's why every animal gets dewormed and then flea tick medication immediately on intake because you don't want your whole building full of fleas. You want those treated and killed before they get in that kennel. Okay, outside of kind of these like common, health things that we do in the medicine part of our job and how we practice, surgery is a cornerstone of shelter medicine. And many of you may have heard about high quality, high volume spay neuter. That was really coined in the shelter medicine space. So when you, as a shelter doctor, have all of these animals coming into your care, it is a numbers game every day, right? I know I have 200 animals in my care and I've got 50 more coming tomorrow, but I don't have any space. And so you're trying to move animals through as quickly as possible. And when spay neuter is a requirement to get them out the door, you try to move through as much spay neuter as possible, and almost every animal we encounter is intact. So, whereas a general practice veterinarian may do, I don't know, 5 surgical procedures a day, we are aiming to do 40 to 50 spay neuter surgeries a day. So the volume is incredibly high. And I encourage you all at some point, if you do kind of go into veterinary medicine, to watch a high volume surgeon do it and how efficient they are, how small their incisions are, and how quickly they are able to do that. It's really, really cool to see. You also may notice some animals, if you've ever seen this, will get like a little green tattoo kind of just to the side of their umbilicus or their belly button. That is a communication tool for us in shelter medicine, but also just for, veterinarians in general, to indicate that the animal has been altered. Sometimes it's hard to know, especially if you get like a really hairy or really fluffy animal, to see if they have a spay scar. And then also maybe they had a different abdominal surgery and you don't know that it was from a spay. So this is kind of our universal indicator to others, to other shelters, to other, veterinarians, other people, like, hey, somebody's been in here, somebody has spayed or neutered this animal. You may also see this with cats with an ear tip. So outdoor cats, they will get their left ear tipped if they're a community or a feral cat. So that other trappers know from afar that that animal has already been trapped, neutered, and released back outside so that they don't trap it again. Because like I said, you can't examine these animals who are in a trap. And so you want to be able to have a quick way of knowing they've already been altered so that you don't put them back under anesthesia, you don't trap them unnecessarily. And we do everything else that a regular veterinarian does. We do dentals, we do soft tissue procedures. I take eyes out, I cut limbs off. We do mass removals, foreign bodies, bladder stones. We don't do a ton of orthopedics, I will say that, but we can do them. Emergencies, we get dogs who are like caught in a fence and got like a huge laceration or things like that. So we'll do all of that, just like any other vet would. Behavior, this is also a big thing that people think about when they're thinking about the shelter space. And this is a pretty, depending on who you talk to, can be a relatively hot button topic. We are incredibly lucky in that we were actually able to hire a veterinarian who actually came from, who was practicing at Ohio State as our behaviorist. And so he's sitting to be board certified. And so he runs our behavior and animal welfare department now. And that's a huge step forward for our organization. We've never had that before. But when you're talking about behavior in a shelter environment, you're really kind of talking about two things. One of the most important is the welfare of the animal, right? You have just taken them, you have now poked them with vaccines 2 minutes into being into your care. They've had all of these people touching them, they've been moved around. Now you're going to put them in a kennel, right? And that can be really strange and scary. And so you do see a lot of behavior concerns in a shelter environment. Some dogs don't kennel well. You're around a lot of other dogs. It can be noisy. There's new smells, new people. It can be really hard for them. And so monitoring their fear, anxiety, and stress levels while they're with us is really important. We want to make sure that we put them on medication if they need it, that we're monitoring their welfare and their overall well-being from a behavior and a mental well-being standpoint, in addition to their physical well-being. That's incredibly important. We want to make sure we're addressing their welfare while they're with us. And the other biggest thing is this animal safe? There's a lot of controversy in the shelter medicine space about, is there any really good, perfect test for this? And no, there's not. There's not a perfect assessment to say that this dog is going to be bomb-proof and just absolutely perfect in a home, right? We don't have that. We don't know that. And you can have a dog that you get all this information on and appears great and could go out and then immediately bites the owner, right? But what you're trying to do is kind of mitigate that risk. Get as much information on those animals as you can while they're in your care. So what are their experience while volunteers are walking them? What are their experience when they're in play group with other dogs? How are they for their medical exam? All those different things kind of go in, and we collect all of that information, and we then make adoption recommendations based off of all of that information. So, you may have this super rambunctious, like 100-pound giant, like Saint Bernard mix thing, right? We actually just had this, who's super sweet and friendly, but almost too sweet and friendly. And so he doesn't have any chill, right? We might say, yeah, this is a great, super friendly dog, but maybe a home with really young children is not the best bet. Not because we think that maybe they're going to be aggressive to them, but might knock them down or might have a hard time not kind of getting in their face or increase the risk of a negative interaction there. So that's a big part about what behavior is collecting as much information as possible, knowing that a lot of these animals we have zero background on, like what their living situation was, how good they did with cats, dogs, children, all that kind of stuff. So oftentimes we're going off of nothing and we try to gather information throughout their entire shelter process so that we can make a really good recommendation about what's the best home for that animal. So that's another really big thing that we're doing kind of when we're assessing behavior. And then most importantly, this is the number one reason why people surrender to a shelter, hands down. For cats, it's peeing outside the litter box. It is the number one reason why people surrender their cats to a shelter. For dogs, it's a whole slew of behaviors, separation anxiety, they're destroying the home. They don't do well with other dogs. They don't do well with children. They are dog reactive on walks. I mean, you name it. Behavior is hands down the number one reason that we see. And I would also say that trend is kind of echoed nationwide for surrender into a shelter. And so most of these times we know about those issues. And so we want our behavior team kind of addressing those from the get-go, or if we even think that's something that we can address in the shelter environment. Forensics. This is the big scary thing that everybody is, it's like a doctor is like, oh my God, I can't do that. That sounds, too intense, too legal. That's not what I'm here for. I will say this is actually really, really cool and really fun. And I have no idea if I would love this or hate this when I joined shelter medicine, but it's really cool. It's like a big puzzle you're trying to solve. And as a veterinarian, my job is really just to collect evidence. I am just there to collect evidence and apply the law and veterinary medicine together, right? And so I kind of have to know, what does the Ohio Revised Code say about animal cruelty? And I look at the animal and I make an objective assessment. And I do diagnostics, I collect evidence. Sometimes I'm going out on scene and I'm looking at things like, how are they housed? What was their food like, their water like, kind of what was their living situation? And I collect all of that together and I create a report. It's not my job to prosecute or try the case. It's not my job to decide if they are guilty or not guilty. It's just my job to collect evidence and to kind of assess the situation and apply veterinary medicine to the law. And so sometimes I am asked to go in court and testify to my findings. And again, I'm not there to say to a jury, oh, this person's guilty because of X, Y, and Z. I'm there to present objective findings about my veterinary exam or my diagnostic findings and what I think that means, and how that might apply to the law. So I don't decide, oh, yep, you're guilty, and then what your punishment may be if you're guilty. That's not really the role of the veterinarian in the process. They're really kind of there to be the expert and to collect evidence and kind of say what's going on with the health of that animal. So I don't testify often. Overwhelmingly, most of our casework ends in a plea deal, and so it does not go to a jury trial. We probably maybe get like one or two a year that I have to go down and testify for. So I don't do it a lot. But for me, I actually really like this part of shelter medicine. You can go into shelter medicine and not do this at all. Like I said, there's a lot of animal shelters who don't touch animal cruelty. It's handled by a different organization within their community. But okay, a couple case examples that I think are fun or you guys might find interesting. So when I started my job in 2018, and like I said, I was the only veterinarian at that time. Gosh, I had maybe been there for like 3 months, and our animal cruelty team let me know that they had a bird case coming down the pipeline, and I panicked because if you guys ever go to vet school, they don't teach you anything about birds. You don't touch birds, you don't learn bird medicine. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never held a bird before. I don't know anything about birds. And I'm the only veterinarian. And I'm like, okay, well, like, what's the situation? And all we had were photos of inside of this home. And you can kind of see some of these up here, but just cages stacked upon cages stacked upon cages. Um, and this person, unfortunately, was a breeder of lovebirds and cockatiels, and then also kind of just was rescuing other birds, but had gotten into a situation where she got really overwhelmed, right? And it happens a lot of times when we're dealing with animal cruelty offenders. They don't ever intend to get here. And a lot of times they are incredibly passionate and feel very strongly about the animals that they care for. They got in over their head. They're dealing with a mental health situation. And it happens, and it can happen really quickly. And so unfortunately, things got really overwhelming, and I think we ended up pulling out 604 alive birds from this home. Um, we flew in experts from the ASPCA to help. So you can kind of see them in some of the pictures. They helped us kind of collect all of the birds. They helped me examine the birds, which was like, oh, amazing. I got some local exotic veterinarians to come out and help me and teach me. The Columbus Zoo came out and helped me try and figure out, like with some of these more exotic species, like how to house them, what food to give them, how to trim their beaks, like how do I even hold these things, that kind of stuff. And so this was my very first large scale animal cruelty case, and still to this day, the largest cruelty case that Columbus Humane has ever done. It was a great learning experience. Do I hope to ever do this again? No. I think I've touched enough birds for my lifetime. But that being said, it was a really unique way to see all of these organizations come together for one thing. And it also kind of goes to show how small veterinary medicine is and how much you need other veterinarians locally, nationally, whatever that is. Because if I had to do this by myself, I'd still probably be looking at birds like 8 years later, you know? It was so cool to see all of these other veterinarians like willing to step in and lend me a hand and teach me something and help me in a time of need. And I'll never forget that. And so I try to do that for other veterinarians as well, if they're in need of something and they're looking for that. And I encourage you all, if you enter the profession, just to understand how small the profession is, and you can't do it all. I mean, goodness gracious, there's like so many different types of species out there. You can't know everything. And so it's really nice to be able to phone a friend or to call somebody to kind of help you in a situation like this. So thankfully, that case is over, and hopefully we never have to revisit that. We were able to place all of the birds, and it was crazy. We had people driving from all over the United States to adopt these things. They were like standing in line for hours trying to adopt some of these birds. So it was wild. Another really big case that I did, and this was my first jury trial, was we had somebody who was running a like brokering, almost acting as a puppy mill. And so he would take in puppies from different places, and then he would have them in his garage, and he would resell them through like puppy sites. Like you've probably seen them. There's like Lancaster puppies or whatever. He had a website like that, and he was selling puppies. We kept getting complaints that those dogs were dying of parvo. He did indeed have parvo in there. He had a lot of it. We had a lot of dogs that ended up at OSU and MedVet being treated for parvo when we got in there and took many of these dogs. In addition to that, they were also breeding corgis. And so we took in, gosh, maybe like 60 corgis. That they had. And so they were breeding corgis. They were also brokering puppies. And in addition to that, they were running a reptile store. And so there was a separate location that was a reptile store, but in the bottom of their house, they were also, it was full of reptiles that they were breeding or getting ready to sell. So um, all in all, when we took in all of these animals, it was like well over 200 animals that we took from this case. And it was everything from puppies with parvo to these like purebred corgi puppies to I had like an 11-foot boa that we were housing. I mean, just hundreds of snakes, leopard geckos, any type of reptile you could think. Some things I didn't even know how to identify. I'm like, I've never even seen that before. I don't even know what this is. And so again, I was able to phone a friend and get a exotic vet who kind of specializes in reptiles to come out and help me, and not only just talk about like how to do an exam on them or how to figure out what's kind of going on with them, but also like what's the best way to house these things? How do we care for them while they're with us? as animals are going through an animal cruelty case, we immediately gain temporary custody, and the complainant basically has to post bond while their trial is going through in order to keep those animals as their own. If they fail to pay that bond as the case is going on, then they become ours and we're allowed to place them. In this case, they were paying bond, and so we had these animals for months and months and months. And like I said, this was my very first jury trial. Um, so I testified in front of a jury of my peers about this case. They were found guilty. They ended up moving out of the county. They weren't allowed to sell, breed, or have any animals for the next several years, and also got quite a bit of fines and things like that. But they ended up moving outside of the county. I actually don't even know if they're in the state anymore, but they ended up moving shortly after that. So all in all, successful case for my very first kind of jury trial case, because this was intense. Oh, also they had in the backyard giant potbelly pigs and turkeys. So I don't have any photos of those, but we ended up with potbelly pigs and turkeys from this case too. And so, and goats. It was just kind of a hodgepodge of all different kinds of things. And um, this case was really hard from a veterinary perspective because you had all these different species, all these different diseases. I had, pregnant corgis who were giving birth, and I had parvo dogs and lizards I had never touched or seen before. So it was a really good learning experience for me as well to do this one. Um, and not that they're fun to do, but they are kind of fun to do. There's something really cool about these cases where you spend months investigating and you go in and then you get the animals and you get them better and you get them well and you win the case, and then you get to see all of them have really positive outcomes. It was the same thing with the corgis. We had people driving. People were like camping out in our parking lot to adopt these corgis. It was a wild experience. And then probably the one that tested me the most as a veterinarian in terms of like, okay, what do you do next? This is kind of all on you. Was there was an individual who had a whole bunch of Australian Shepherds in their house. And of course, none of them were spayed and neutered. And so things quickly got out of hand. Um, and then for a set of circumstances, these people had to enter a hospital. And so all of these animals we split between our facility and then also the Franklin County Dog Shelter. And so I forget, I think we ended up with a little over like 30 or 40 of these Australian Shepherds, all different ages, from this home. And again, like I said, you assume that none of these animals have been vaccinated or have been vetted before, right? Um, but I will tell you, I always thought that I would know distemper when I saw it. I always assumed it was like this rare thing that like when I saw it, I would just know. Well, it happened. It came and I didn't see it. Me and the other veterinarians, we all missed it. And these animals came into our care and they all had respiratory disease, but that's not that uncommon in the shelter environment. Like I said, we see lots of like goopy eyes, runny noses, all kinds of stuff. But otherwise, these animals were all relatively normal. Maybe about one day into us having them, a dog had a seizure and died. And we thought that was really strange. Again, this is where it pays to have friends and to have good contacts. I contacted the doctors over at Franklin County Dog Shelter and said, hey, you know, how's your population looking? And then they emphasized that they had some dogs who were having neurologic disease and severe respiratory disease and GI disease to the point where a couple of theirs were hospitalized. And immediately between the two of us, we kind of had some red flags go up. The problem with testing for distemper is it's not like a cage side test like parvo where you're just like, yep, I know we have it, right? So we had to take blood on all of these dogs and send it out. And we had to quarantine and shut down our entire facility. Because what you can't do is spread distemper. I know a lot of you are young and you probably don't remember the distemper outbreak that happened in Franklin County, but they had to euthanize like a massive amount of animals. And it was really, really sad for the community. It was a heartbreaking time in shelter medicine. And so everybody kind of had a little bit of PTSD from that. And we're like, we can't go down that road again. We can't go down that road again. Like we got to make sure we do all the right things. And so we had everything in quarantine, we tested, and you kind of have to wait, but you're hoping you don't spread it. And kind of in that waiting period, we had a couple more animals become so severely neurologic and sick that they either died or we had to euthanize them. And sure enough, they came back positive for distemper. And so this was the very first time in my career. It took me about 3 years out for my very first time to see distemper. Um, and thankfully, I'm going to knock on wood, I have not seen it since. So, do you see this? Yes. If you're in the shelter world, will you likely see this at some point? Yes. My guess is probably also that I have probably seen it and I don't know that I've seen it and I've missed it because it's not as obvious as I think they tell you in vet school that it's going to be like in your face blaring that this is what's going on. So, but this case really challenged me, and I kind of held my breath for a couple weeks trying to make sure that I wasn't going to cause an outbreak in my shelter, in my community. How do I care for these dogs that have distemper? How do I, prevent them from getting it to somebody else? All of those different facets. And this was a really good example of kind of how a shelter and a community can come together to kind of try to address a problem that otherwise, had nobody gotten involved in, all these dogs would have died in that house. Okay, so that's kind of all the things about shelter medicine in terms of like, what does it look like to practice it or to be a veterinarian in it? I wanted to make sure I kind of address with you guys some of the myths that I hear about veterinary medicine, or even things that I believed too before I entered the field. The biggest one you're going to hear is like the pay sucks. You're going to hear that all over, right? Is it what they're paying in emergency medicine? No. I will tell you this though, I have a very competitive pay and make what my counterparts are making in general practice, if not more. Um, what I think that I have as a benefit that far exceeds that of general practice is my ability to take time off. I currently get 7 weeks of paid time off a year, which is unheard of in veterinary medicine, and I can use it whenever and however I want. When you're kind of practicing in general practice, you have all these appointments, and all of these animals are like very dependent on you. And so if you wake up one morning and you're sick and you need to call out, there has to be somebody to see those appointments. So sometimes it can be really hard to take time off. Well, now I work with 8 other veterinarians and I don't have any scheduled appointments. And so it's like, if I wake up and it's snowing outside and I can't come in, I have other veterinarians who got me, and it's not a huge drain on them. And I can take time off if I need it. And so that has been the biggest game changer for me. And so this idea around poor work-life balance, like I work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And I have a very good pay, and my pay is not dependent on how much product I sell. There's no like production thing tied into my salary. I just get a consistent salary. I have amazing time off. I get all the holidays off. Like I don't have to work on, any of the holidays like you do in some of the other facets. So I get all 12 of the federal holidays off. Um, and my schedule can be flexible. Like if one week I want to work, we're open 7 days a week. So if one day I want to change my schedule, I can do that. It gives you great flexibility. And honestly, the pay is not less than other facets of veterinary medicine. And in some ways, it may even be more. And for me, the benefit piece far exceeds some of those other things as well. I think it's important too, when you're in a humane society, oftentimes you're big enough that your organization can offer you things that small GPs can't, such as like retirement benefits, health insurance, all that kind of stuff. So I have access to all of that almost as if I worked in a large business or corporation, because we have almost 80 employees. And so I get to have all of those benefits where I may not if I worked in a general practice where we only employed like 6 people, if that makes sense. So getting things like maternity leave, tuition reimbursement, all that kind of stuff are benefits that you get when you're able to work in kind of a bigger place and things like that. Also, your work has incredible meaning. Anything you do in veterinary medicine has incredible meaning. There is something really, really special about the work that you do in shelter medicine. You take these animals who are in most cases unwanted, or they're stray and they don't have anything. And to take an animal that's like found stray and incredibly emaciated, and they come to you and you get to fix them or get them well, and to see them get adopted, and maybe it's like, a 10-year-old who's getting his very first dog and he's so excited and that dog is so excited. And for you to get to see that whole transition and how impactful that is for that animal, for that child, for that family is just something that's really hard to get in a lot of other places in veterinary medicine. It is. Um, and you just feel like your work has impact. When I'm working at our low-cost veterinary clinic, people are literally hugging me. They're thanking me. They're crying in tears of joy because they have been turned away because they have not been able to afford care. And they're just so incredibly grateful. And the impact you've had on their life is just huge. And they let you know that. Um, and that's just really cool. I didn't have those experiences in general practice. If I did, they were like very few and far between. And I get that like every day now. And it's just so cool to have that really meaningful work and knowing that like it meets kind of what your values are in terms of how you feel about animals and ownership in the community and being a resource and being supportive. It just is really cool. And also, this is a lot of veterinarians' nightmares. But I have no idea what my day looks like, and I love that. I love unpredictable, chaotic environments. And so shelter medicine is this beautiful thing for me. A lot of veterinarians don't like that. And I will say, if you want more of a structured or rigid thing and you like that, you like having scheduled appointments, you like knowing what your day is going to look like, shelter medicine probably isn't for you. Um, because like my day may start being like, oh, I'm gonna do, this like dental today. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, my cruelty agents are at my door with a pot-bellied pig. And I have to completely change what I'm doing. I love that. It keeps me on my toes. It gives me great variety. I really appreciate that part of shelter medicine. Um, it's kind of similar to what people who end up in emergency medicine like. If that's not your vibe, yeah, shelter medicine may not be for you. But it is something for me that I really, really like. So what's next for shelter medicine? I think this is really cool. And another big reason why I stay in this profession is it keeps getting better. So like I said, we've now been recognized as a specialty. You can get board certified in shelter medicine. There are more and more internships and residencies available where there didn't used to be at all. Every shelter, like I said, kind of operates a little bit differently. And so sometimes it can be hard kind of knowing what is protocol, what is standard, what is the gold standard for shelter medicine. We're creating those, the field is creating those. We're getting more kind of in a groove about like what those expectations are and providing care for animals in a humane society. And shelter medicine, I think it's always been community medicine, but people are really kind of starting to put that together. We are here to serve the community and whatever the community needs. And to be honest, the community dictates what my job looks like. And it changes because the community changes and their needs change. And so, you know, before COVID, didn't have a lot of people like surrendering dogs and we are very cat heavy. And, people weren't really calling, trying to look for veterinary care. I mean, they were, but it wasn't in high volumes. And then COVID hit and that was a weird time. And then now, we've kind of come around and then it's like, oh, yep, all of these people have dogs and they want to surrender them, or we've got all of these like feral and community cats, and now we have people who are really looking for access to veterinary care. It just kind of changes all the time because your community changes. The challenges they face change, what their needs are change, pet ownership changes. So you're really reactive to that. You can't really plan for it, and you just kind of have to be in it to support the community in the best way that you can. Um, we've started a field services unit with Columbus Humane as well, where we are doing vaccine clinics. And so if any of you attend either any of those 7 meetings, sometimes we ask those members to come out and help us. And so you guys can participate if you would like, but we do them about once a month, spring through fall. And we pick a different place kind of all throughout Columbus where we feel like our impact will be greatest. And we provide free vaccines, core vaccines to dogs and cats. We'll do anywhere between like 300. Our largest, we did like 600 animals in like a 3-hour slot. And so this is a big part of community medicine is going to where people are to provide that care instead of expecting people to kind of come to us. One Health clinics. So combining and understanding how connected human health and animal health and our environment is together. And that a lot of people will avoid going to the doctor but maybe they'll let me maybe they'll let a human nurse check their blood pressure and, do a diabetes screening if I give their dog free vaccines. And so we've been doing some more partnerships where we're providing these types of clinics to ensure that the humans who are caring for these pets are also healthy so that these family units can stay together. Access to veterinary care, this is going to be the big one. Like, if anybody said what's shelter medicine next, I would say access to veterinary care, like hands down. This is all anybody is talking about in my space. The recent study that came out is 1/3 of all pet owners were unable to access a veterinarian in the last year, which is crazy. Like, that's really bad. And that's a problem. And within the profession, we got to figure out how to fix that. Is it all financial? Probably not. Is that a good chunk of it? Yes. But what are the other reasons? What are all the barriers to access, and how do we address those barriers? And we need to do it very quickly as a profession, because you have a lot of vulnerable animals when you think about 1/3 of every animal's not being able to access a veterinarian within a year's time frame. So access to veterinary care, cannot understate that that is the next step for shelter medicine. And surrender prevention are just focusing on how do we keep pets in homes. We don't need to take everything and rehome it, right? What can I do to support that pet and that family to keep that family unit together? So whether that's food, whether that's veterinary care, whether that's temporary boarding, whether that's a behavior service and training, whatever that may be, but what can we do to do that? And so that's where a lot of shelters are moving towards. Okay, that was a mouthful, a lot about shelter medicine, and kind of all the different areas. And I think I finished like just on time. um, Here's a slide. If you guys want to shoot me an email, you're welcome to. I try to do my best to at least respond to you guys within like a day or two. If I don't respond to you within a week, then maybe shoot me another one because it's probably gotten stuck in the inbox somewhere, but I'll try and do my best to get to reach out to you. So, but I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything they want to ask me. I can't see the chat for some reason anymore, so I don't know. Maybe if I stop this. Oh, wait. If you have a question, you can pop it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. Or if you don't have any, you guys can also go like eat dinner or like, take a nap or go to bed or something fun that you guys can do when you're stressed out college kids.
If you joined tonight's meeting a little late, please type your name number in the chat for attendance. And like Dr. Advent said, please feel free to unmute yourselves or pop a question in the chat for her in the couple minutes we have left.
Also, if you guys want, you can use my email and things like that if you're ever interested and you just want to come out and shadow or you want to see what things are like. We love having students around. And like I said, we have vet students every day who are here learning spay neuter. And so we're very used to kind of having kids around and teaching and things like that. So you guys are always welcome if you want to reach out to me. And then hopefully, if you guys kind of continue on your veterinary path and you end up in vet school, then we will see you in a few short years when you're doing your rotation with us. And we will do our best to teach you spay neuter so that you are an expert by the time you leave with us. So. Okay, let's see. Somebody said, do you offer internships or volunteering? We don't at this time do like a formalized internship. If you have something like summers and you want to come see what we do, or like you want to hang out with us like a couple days a week, we can do that. We just don't have paid internships at this time. Volunteering, if you go to our website, there will be a link there to volunteer and you can sign up. We're always looking for volunteers. And said, okay, so you said every day is different and you encourage us to shadow a shelter vet to see what the day-to-day is like. What was your day like today? That's a great question. What did I do today? So, I mean, this is the hard part now in my new role, kind of as being the chief operating officer and chief medical officer. A lot of my time is in meetings. So I actually met with a couple different organizations, one out in Mississippi and one out in Texas, because they are having difficulty with overpopulation. And so I met with them to talk about being a partner to help possibly get some animals transferred. And this is really crazy. One of them, they have a plane and they want to fly me dogs, which is a whole wild thing that I've never even considered before. So I did a lot of that. We do daily shelter rounds. So every morning, and all the different areas get together and we talk about every animal in our care. So that's kind of how it kind of started. I taught some students for like an hour or two. And then I actually had a board meeting. And so I did that. So kind of a lot of different meetings and a lot of talking. It's definitely not what it's like for a lot of my other shelter vets because my role is much more administrative and I'm kind of the ideal developer and things like that. But oh, what is my email here? I'll type it in here really quick. Oh, have I rescued animals from the shelter that are now your pet? Yes, I will say I am actually very good at this though. A lot of people, like within probably the first month that they are employed at the animal shelter, they have an animal in their home. I have been pretty good. Thankfully, I had a lot of my animals from before. And so I've kind of stuck it to just adopting some cats from that route. But I definitely have some of my other coworkers who now have ended up with like 5 dogs. I like to do like short-term foster. So if I have like an interesting medical case or something and they need extended foster, sometimes I'll do that. I really like to do like neonates, so like bottle babies. And so I'll do a lot of that and then I'll bring them back to the shelter. So it kind of scratches the itch without me ending up with like 20 animals in my home, but I still get to do that and then bring them back. So honestly, that's another benefit to shelter medicine is you get to like try them out and then give them back a little bit, you know? So, okay. I don't think I see. Oh, well, if you guys think of anything, any other questions that you have, like I said, feel free to email me or you want to come adopt a pet, we're open from 2 to 7. So come on out. Oh my gosh, you adopted a cockatiel. That's amazing. That's awesome that you got some birds out of that case. Um, I almost adopted one and I didn't. I actually regret not taking a bird home from that case because I'm never gonna have that experience again. And so I wish I would have adopted at least one, but I didn't. That's really cool to hear that you did. So.
Your email didn't pop up when you resent
Oh,
it.
it didn't? Oh, you know what? Because I think I have it under, I'm sorry, I think I had it under direct message. Hold on, let me do this. There we go. I'm sorry. I think I had it directed to one individual.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, I'll let you guys go do something fun with your evening. But it was a pleasure to get to talk to you all. And if you have any questions, reach out to me and we'd love to have you out of the shelter if you want to come visit, okay? Thank you all. Have a good evening.